Growing up, I was a science geek. I really liked science, and I was sure I was going to have a career in the sciences. But I've spent my entire adult life working as an artist, designing and building kinetic sculptures. This is the story of the influences, or what I like to call the nudges, that brought about the change. The first big influence, more than a nudge, was a woman. I was studying physics in Boston, and Marji was studying art in Rhode Island. But Marji was doing a kind of art that I had never seen before. She was making wooden machines. The first ones didn't work, but one weekend I came for a visit, and she had made a large wooden chain and cog set. And when you turned the crank, it actually worked. I was very excited. This was my idea of art. It made me smile, it was whimsical, and I had all kinds of ideas for things for her to do. And she said, "No, I have other projects to work on. If you like this, why don't you take it and run with it?" Well, it wasn't the time, but a seed had been planted. Well, graduation followed and financial reality, and Marji got a job teaching art that she loved, and I got a job doing mainframe programming where I spent a lot of time waiting. During some of that time, I started sketching ideas for little wooden gizmos that would move. I located some scrap hardwoods in a dumpster, and our back bedroom became a sort of a workshop. And I started teaching myself art and design. The most successful piece from this period was one called Xylo. I thought of Xylo as a set of dominoes that kept resetting themselves as you turned over the first piece. Well, I was having a great time doing this. I was learning a lot. We were actually making a little money selling these at local art and craft shows, and I decided that this was much more interesting than my day job, so I quit. And I started doing this full time. I wanted to see if I could answer that question that came up all the time when I showed Xylo was, can you make it run longer? The way I decided to try doing this was with a weight drive. I didn't want to use electricity, I didn't want to deal with cords and batteries. Now, a weight drive uses the energy of the falling weight to provide the motion, but then uses the actual motion of the piece to control the fall of the weight. In my first piece, which was called BW Cornwalis, the rolling wheel triggers the mechanism, and then the mechanism itself changes the angle of the ramp so the wheel keeps rolling. This was not a very efficient piece, but I was just thrilled that it ran for 20 minutes at a time. Clockmakers have been using weight drives for centuries, but they have a big problem. They have to do something useful like keep time. I didn't have that problem. I just wanted to create interesting motion. In Inventor Released, the rotating wheel lifts the lever triggers the mechanism, the mechanism pushes on the lever, and the wheel keeps rotating. I combined this mechanism with the rolling wheel concept and made Serendipity. At about the time I was developing this, the American craft movement was undergoing one of its periodic revivals. And there were a lot of small art and craft galleries springing up all over the United States. They, by luck, they happened to be coming to a show in Rhinebeck, New York, to find new artists and new work. Rhinebeck was only a few hours from where we lived, so we applied and were rejected, and we applied again and were rejected, and the third time was the charm. And the show itself was a revelation. These are some of the pieces from my first design period. I thought there were an infinite number of possibilities, and I started trying to make them. They weren't, but I learned from all the failures how to make these successes. This is the first Rhinebeck show that we did, and this is where the buyers came, and they knew what they wanted to buy. They placed orders that were large by anything we ever known, and they placed them throughout the year so I could actually plan a workflow. I had always thought of this as a pipe dream. I thought I was going to have to grow up and get an adult job, but after this show, I began to see there was a possibility. I was working in a cinder block shed, and it was hot in the summer, freezing in the winter, and it was always cramped. After the show, we decided if this was going to be a success, we needed a bigger place. Marji started working on some drawings, because she liked to draw houses, so she did drawings for a house studio. I started working on looking for a piece of land. We read books on carpentry, because neither of us had tried a project like this before. And with 9 months of long days and nights and help from our family, we moved into a partially completed, because handmade houses are never done, location. Well, now I had a new place to live, and I had a new market for my work. And this kind of nudged my work in a new direction. I had been concentrating on the mechanisms, but now I wanted to take those mechanisms and create patterns of motion. I knew that if I rotated 2 wheels in an opposite direction, I could get optical effects. So I modified one of my existing mechanisms and created kaleidoscope. Well, this piece was exciting, but the next piece, which I called serpentine, was both frustrating and thrilling. It was frustrating because I've used a double pendulum motion. And when I put it together and just played with it, I could get some fascinating random motion. But I couldn't figure out a mechanism to do it, because the mechanism basically had to stay out of the way most of the time and just give it a push when it needed it. It took a lot of daydreaming, a lot of long nights, but I finally figured it out. And the effort was worth it because it developed a whole new class of mechanisms, and I developed a love for random, constantly changing patterns of motion. For the first 10 years, there's a little side here, we took a little detour in the world of toy design, inspired by our newly acquired toy testing department. That would be a talk all by itself, but the reason I mention it here is because it was through the toy world that we learned about constant force springs. A constant force spring has the drive characteristics of a weight drive, but it's far more compact, and you don't have to design in a weight drop location. It's different from a clock spring, a coiled clock spring, because it doesn't get tighter and tighter when you wind it up. This opened up all kinds of new design possibilities, which I have some examples here in tapestry and dyad. In tapestry, I was able to shrink my mechanism down and put it between the 2 patterning wheels. You can still see it if you look from the side, but the focus is now just on the changing patterns of motion. In dyad, I was able to take 2 small mechanisms and put them on one common rotating base. The mechanisms only affect each other by the change in momentum, so it makes a very random motion. The first 10 years, designing was done on a drafting board, large sheets of paper. I draw out the parts by hand, glue the paper down to a piece of wood, cut them out, shape them with a sander, and if you didn't like the part, it was literally back to the drawing board. This began to change in 1984 when we started playing with a Macintosh computer, but really didn't become useful for a couple of years when we started using Adobe Illustrator and a laser printer. With Illustrator, I could augment my pretty limited drawing skills and create any patterns I could dream up and then replicate them precisely. And with a printer, I could print them at any scale and then cut them out. If I didn't like the design, it was just modify the drawing and reprint. The designs got larger and more complex. The software industry and personal computers were developing at a rapid rate at that time, and I used a animation program that allowed me to make spirals. And I said, what if I had 2 spirals? What kind of pattern would I see? The rendering at that time probably took hours, but it was enough to inspire me to design and build symphony. And visualization using software became an important part of what I did. When you jump ahead 10 years, I then had a real-time link between my drawing and animation program, and I used that extensively in the variation series of sculptures. I designed literally hundreds of different patterns before I settled on the final 9 for this series. And it was a very engrossing process of tweak the drawing, see the animation, and then you go, oh, well, what if I did this? And you tweak it, and you get another one. I could spend hours just playing with that. So that's the past. What's nudging me now? Sound. I had always worked to minimize the sound of my sculptures. I found it distracting. But inspired by a very large set of wind chime tubes, I said, what if I took these tubes and incorporated it into a sculpture and allowed the random motion of the sculpture to generate random musical tones? This was the largest and most complex piece I had done, but also the most personally rewarding. So I've built a career, I think a dream career, by paying attention to life's nudges. An event like this is all about trading nudges, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it leads to. Thank you.